Everyone, welcome to episode 6 of Monday through Friday, Cellular Agriculture for a Pandemic-Free Future. My name is George Ortega, and it is Tuesday, July 14th, 2020 at 10:11 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time, I guess. Let's go over this again, because this show is about just basically describing what we need to do to be free of pandemics in the future. Otherwise, well, so all right. The first thing to understand is that these pandemics would not happen if we didn't have the kind of interaction we have with animals on farms, both factory farms and family farms. Okay, that's the key point. The key point is that we have to stop farming animals completely, not just here in the United States, but throughout the entire world. Otherwise, we're going to be, well, I mean, all right. Actually, I want to, let me back up. I was given some inaccurate information. I spoke to an epidemiologist who suggested to me that that a universal vaccine is just not possible for flus, influenzas. Okay, I did some research on my own, and I discovered that actually they are working on it. It is possible. It's possible that in the future we will have vaccines against coronaviruses, the influenzas type A, type V, and all kinds of strains, right? But the key point with this is that we're 10 years or longer from that, okay? It's going to take us that long. Our problem is that this is not a 1 in 100 year event. Basically, this could happen 5, years after we open up. And we haven't been so lucky. In the 21st century, we've had SARS, we've had MERS. So I think our luck is running out. And I've gone into the moral reasons for this. We've been so amazingly horrible to these animals that, I think we're getting off easy with this pandemic. So, all right, but the idea is that we're going to have to end the farming of animals now. Like, we've got a choice. I mean, like, we could all go vegan, if we had like intelligent leaders, across the board, they could probably persuade us to do this, but they're not all that smart, and people aren't all that good. Come on, if you guys, who eat meat and dairy and eggs without thinking of what happens to these animals, if there's so many of you out there and you become politicians, the hope that you all become vegans, is perhaps a bit too much for us now. So, considering that, we have an option, and it's fortunate. Like, this show is about cellular agriculture, or growing our meat, fish, dairy, eggs outside of animals in a way that is essentially pandemic free. Okay, like these, the environment that we'd have to produce these products in, these bioreactors, are so sterile, they have to be sterile, that these viruses don't get a chance to form. Bats, like one of the major transmitters of influenza, they don't get a chance to infect a pig or a bird that then infects us. Okay, so like, this is a very sterile kind of procedure. And this really, again, until the universal vaccines are perfected or, developed in 10, 15, 20 years, it's hard to say how long it's going to take. This is the only way we're going to be safe. Now, all right, consider so we have to transition to growing our meat, fish, dairy, egg products in laboratories in a sterile environment. That, incidentally, this isn't a compromise. Actually, the food products that we can produce, the meat that we can produce, would be free from saturated fat, free from cholesterol. We could actually even put in healthy fats like omega-3 fats, so that it'd be much healthier than the meat, fish, dairy products that we eat now. All right, so this is a plus in that way. So, all right. The problem is there is less than $1 billion invested in this industry right now. There's about 40, 50 startups working on the challenges of this. They've already, like, demonstrated, as I've said before, that they can do this in labs. They've already created chicken nuggets, hamburgers, seafood. They can do this in labs, but now the problem is scaling it up to industrial, production. So these products will be cheap enough, competitive with the meat products we buy now, meat, dairy, eggs. So again, because the investment in this field is under $1 billion right now, it may take 10 years or longer. It probably would take 10 years or longer for these, at this rate of investment, for these products to be in supermarkets throughout the world, in any significant numbers. Okay, you may have a few products. For example, there's a Perfect Day, I think, has an ice cream that actually they're selling now. It's an ice cream that, it's real milk, but it's created outside of animals, completely pandemic free. But for 4 pints, you spend $60. That's $15 a pint. That's really expensive. So, all right. Now here's the thing. I referred to a Forbes article recently that was published, I think, June 2nd, that cited a Congressional Budget Office report assessment that stated that this pandemic is estimated to cost the United States about $8 trillion. Okay, it'll probably be more because, like, again, that assessment was probably done in May, and in June and July, we've had such a surge in cases of coronavirus, COVID-19, throughout the United States. So, I wouldn't be surprised if that 8 trillion goes to 10 trillion, 12 trillion, who knows? So, but let's take the $8 trillion price tag of this as, as a conservative estimate of how much it's going to cost us. Okay, what we need to do, instead of like relying on this less than $1 billion to fund the research and development that'll get these products on the market, not in 10 or more years, but probably in 3 or 4, and it's worth, it's worth the investment to fast track it in that way. In order to do that, we're going to need a lot more funding in this field. Okay, so like, let's do a comparison. So like, I came up with a ballpark figure of $50 billion that seems exceedingly reasonable for our US government to start, investing in this new industry right now, not in 10 years, not in 5 years, but right now, start funding these 40, 50 startups that already exist, start funding the research across the board in universities, create new startups. Just, if you throw $50 billion at this problem, you'll probably get an answer to this in 3 or 4 years. That's the point, okay? Now, a lot of people are saying, oh, that's a lot of money, but compared to the $8 trillion we just spent, it's 1/2 of 1% of that. So think about it, we will either live in dread and fear of the next pandemic after we're out of this one, which may take a year or 2 or 3, we don't know yet. But after that happens, we either like live in dread of it happening again, maybe a year or 2 or 5 later, or 10, whatever, or we make this investment. Again, we should be making, I'm going to add this to the message also. We should also be investing, I don't know how much we're investing in these universal vaccines, but that should probably be another 50 billion, So it would be like $100 billion investment right now in what it takes to create a pandemic-free world, as much of the pandemic-free world as we're going to, we can reasonably expect. So, all right, so getting back to the 50 billion for the cellular agriculture, let's do a comparison. I mentioned this yesterday, I believe. Let me mention it again. So let's compare it to homeowners insurance. Okay, in the United States, the median price for a home is about $220,000. Okay, And the average insurance cost per year to insure a home like that is about $1,000 a year. So in 10 years, that would be $10,000. Okay, so $10,000 is about 4.4% of the cost of this house that costs $220,000. So what I'm saying is, like, the average homeowner is paying 4.4% of the cost of their home in insurance, just to insure a house. And we know that these houses, that insurance, it's generally not used. In other words, houses generally don't, catch on fire. They're not destroyed. Generally, I think the insurance is wise. It's prudent, but the likelihood of losing a house like that is very slim. Compare that to the likelihood of another pandemic that is inevitable. Okay, it's not again, the experts will tell you, it's not a matter of when. It's not a matter of if. It's a matter of when. And again, our track record in the 21st century, we're having more and more of these novel, brand new viruses emerging. Old ones are coming back. We are not lucky. And then, getting back to the moral component, considering how horribly we're treating these animals, how we're paying people to abuse them and torture them just so we can get our meat cheap. It's not like we don't really deserve this kind of threat. We're being so evil. I mean, like, those of you who are, who are eating this meat. I've been a vegan for 15 years. About 2% of us here in the United States who have been vegans who aren't part of this problem. Hopefully we're trying to fix it. So again, if you have a person, a homeowner, willing to spend 4.4% of their property value on insurance against an event that is very, very unlikely, then if you use that as a comparison, then we really should be spending not just $50 billion to fast track this cellular agriculture, this clean meat, cultured meat research. We should be spending $350 billion. That would be the equivalent. And maybe that's the better answer, but I'm guessing that 50 billion would be enough. Again, all we have to do is get these products on the market in 3-4 years, and by the time we're emerging from this, it'd be brand new industry, brand new world. Okay, so how's this done? How do we get this done? Let me tell you a little story. The largest cell cultured plant-based food company in the world right now is Just Inc. They're working on both. A lot of companies like Impossible Foods and the Beyond Burger, they're just they're plant-based. They're not trying to grow these these meats. But there's a company called Just Inc. and they used to be called what was it called? What was their name? I don't know. They had Hampshire Farms. Okay, they used to be called Hampshire Farms. But anyway, when they were just started, one of their products was called mayo. Just mayo. So Unilever, one of the food industry giants, decided to sue them, saying you can't call your product mayo because according to the law, mayonnaise has to include eggs, which is an absurd kind of contention to begin with. The egg industry probably paid some lobbyists to get that inserted into the language. So but anyways, so Just Foods, the CEO is Josh Tetrick, they that lawsuit, even if they won, would have just doomed them. There was a small startup back then. They didn't have they have again an over $1 billion value right now, this company. So what do? They launched a social media campaign, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, across the board. They got activists involved, and it became a David versus Goliath kind of a story. The media covered it, and once Unilever was shamed in the public for preventing this amazing, wonderful company industry from using the name mayo, by using their wealth and their power, Unilever's wealth and power to intimidate like that, that the campaign shamed them into dropping the lawsuit, okay? So basically that's what has to happen now. We have to, like, between now and election day, because now is the perfect time to start doing this. We can activate a campaign that tells people, listen, we have a way to stop future pandemics, but the livestock industry, the egg and the dairy industry, they're preventing this from happening. They're preventing this funding. So, like, basically we're the more clear message would be that yes, the right thing to do is to spend 1/2 of 1% of what we're predicted to spend on this COVID-19, this current pandemic, to prevent the next one, which will be inevitable if we don't. So that would be the campaign. And then you'd have to paint, the campaign would paint any and every politician who's against spending at least, again, probably at least $50 billion. If it was 100, 150, that'd be even better, but at least $50 billion on this. The campaign would paint them as completely foolish, completely irresponsible, completely in the pocket of corporations of the livestock industry and the dairy industry, and completely callous to the lives of the hundreds of thousands of people who've already died from this. It'll probably go over 1 million. Completely callous to the destruction that these pandemics create. So that's the campaign. We should be doing this. Because if we don't, think about it. I mean, who knows? This we're not even halfway through this, according to the experts. States that opened up too early, Texas, Florida, they're experiencing, Arizona, they're experiencing major surges in this in cases of COVID-19 now. So we're hardly through this. So again, at first glance, a person might say, well, $50 billion is so much to spend on this research. But come on, I mean, like a homeowner spends 4.4% of the cost of their property on insuring an event that's very, very unlikely to happen. And we're unwilling to spend even 1/2 of 1% of what we're going to be spending on this pandemic to prevent a future one that we absolutely know will happen without, this kind of intervention. I mean, the logic couldn't be either stronger or clearer. And so, like, we need to get this across. And I'm not a social media expert, but there are people out there that, like, within a week, they could get this on Facebook and all the vehicles, and in a month, like by September, there could be so much public support for this that by October or after the election, whatever, these funds would be released. Or if not, the worst case scenario, we wait until Biden gets in January. But so that's where we are now. We're lucky with this coronavirus. SARS was much more deadly. The 1918 Spanish flu, which incidentally, started in France, it was brought back to the United States by soldiers in World War I. And Spain it's called the Spanish flu because Spain was neutral in that war. It wasn't involved in that war. And that was the only country that reported on this illness. All the other countries censored their scientists from coming, from publicizing that this influenza was happening. So, like, anyway, the Spanish flu was much more deadly. Some of these viruses, like avian flu, they can kill like 50% of the people who get them. Whereas, like, I think this COVID-19 is killing maybe 2%. So again, we're playing with fire. If we think that it's wise to not spend this $50 billion, to just hope that once we come out of this, we'll be safe until until these vaccines, these universal vaccines, and there may have to be a couple of, because like, for example, with influenza, there's influenza type A, influenza type B, you know, various strains, H5N1, H1N1 and all, there's different kinds of these viruses. So like, again, it may be 10 or 15 years before these viruses are perfected or marketed or, you know, everyone's vaccinated. So it just seems amazingly risky, beyond risky, to not intervene, to not have this new industry, you know, provide us with foods that are not just healthier for us. That, you know, the two major causes of death in the United States, amounting to about 1 million people, I think, combined, are heart disease and cancer. Maybe over the million each year die of these two diseases. And the number one, for example, cause of heart disease is meat consumption. And with cancer, a very, you know, one of the main causes of cancer is processed meats. So, and you know, eggs and dairy aren't that healthy either. So basically, these new foods would not only protect us from future pandemics, they would also make us much healthier, reduce our healthcare costs, keep us healthier. You know, so lastly, I mean, the benefits of this new cultured cell industry, cellular agriculture, couldn't be overstated. I mean, in addition to like preventing pandemics, keeping us healthier, our livestock industry, most people don't realize, is responsible for about 14.5% of the greenhouse gases that are causing climate change, global warming. You know, they're heating up the climate, and like, you know, that's a problem that's beyond. Or anyway, so like now 14.5% of that, you know, of these greenhouse gas emissions is the equivalent of the entire transportation industry. So, you know, farming animals, especially cows, but you know, farming animals is causing as much greenhouse gas emission as cars, trains, planes, trucks, you know, the entire transportation industry combined. So on so many levels, in so many ways, it's just such a no-brainer that we should invest this $50 billion and invest it now, not wait a year or two or 5 or 10. It goes beyond that. You know, COVID-19, the coronavirus is a flu, it's an influenza, right? But another major threat, the threat behind the bubonic plague, is the bacteria. Not virus-borne diseases, but bacterial infections, contagious diseases. And the problem with that is, like, some experts predict that what's happening is, like, we have antibiotics that we've developed that when we get sick, you know, with a bacterial infection, we take an antibiotic and it works. It does the job, right? But the problem is that the more we use antibiotics, the more these bacteria develop antibiotic resistance. You know, they become immune to our antibiotics. And our problem is that, like, we only, of the antibiotics we produce and use each year, human beings only use 20% of them. 80% go to pigs and chickens, these animals in our factory farms that are grown in such unsanitary conditions that they're rife. That, in other words, like, if they didn't feed them these antibiotics, you know, they'd be like, you know, they'd be dying, you know, every day. The point being that this industry, this livestock industry, is also endangering us, you know, through antibiotic resistance. Okay, and again, like, you know, some experts say that, like, if we think climate change is a risk to our public health, you know, these superbugs that are bacterial infections, whatever bacteria that have become immune to antibiotics, they're apparently much, much greater risk. I'm a bit distracted, a lot going on earlier today. So anyway, so come on, yes, do something about it. You know, like let's talk. I've got about 3 minutes left. Let's get a little religious. I mean, like, you know, if you're paying people to buy your to torture, to abuse farm animals, cows, chickens, sheep. You know, if you're paying people to abuse and torture these animals just so you can, you know, buy these products more cheaply, you're why we're in this mess. You and all your friends, your family, whoever you know is in this, is not a vegan. So you know, if you believe in God, and 80 to 90% of you here in the United States believe in God or a higher power, you have the understanding that we tend to get rewarded when we do good and punished when we don't. All right, so this is our punishment, okay? You and your friends and people you know who eat meat, and you know, and you're just like completely oblivious to the harm you cause these animals. You're responsible for this pandemic. So it's time for you to repent. It's time for you to make amends, to, you know, to get involved in amplifying this message of spending this $50 billion to bring these cell-cultured products to market sooner than later, you know, rather than waiting 10 years and risking another, you know, $10, $20 trillion costing pandemic that may be possible in the next 10 years. Rather than going through that, let's do the research now. Let's fund this research. So that's up to you. You know, talk to your politicians, talk to media people, get them to watch these episodes if you want. You know, like, I'm not you know, I'm a thinker, right? My IQ is like in the 99.64th percentile, which is like around the range of the average Nobel laureate. You know, it's about 25 points higher than the average doctor, and doctors are the profession that's most intelligent of all the professions. So, you know, but as you've noticed, I'm not the greatest messenger. All right, so this movement needs a person who can like activate this social media campaign, just like with Just Foods, how they did that, how they got that going. You know, so it's up to you. I mean, those of you who are part of the problem, it's really mostly your responsibility to get us out of the next one. All right, so I hope you feel, you know, guilty, threatened, you know, because really, I'm like, you know, what you're doing is beyond horrible, and I hope you you understand this. I mean, this isn't to blame you. I don't believe you have a free will. All right, you know. All right, I will do this again tomorrow. Okay, take care.